மீடியா உங்கள் கனவா? படிக்கும் அனைவருக்கும் இன்டர்ன்ஷிப் பிளேஸ்மெண்ட். பாண்டே ஸ்கூல் ஆஃப் ஜர்னலிசம் ஷார்ட் டேர்ம் கோர்ஸில் உடனே சேர 7338824242.
Website. We have waited till now. There is no sign it's coming, and I don't want all of you to waste your time. I know the cycle requires you to do other things. Therefore, I'm speaking without the judgment in my hand. Only what was reported in the press, which we have seen multiple versions of that. I've also spoken to our lawyers who appeared on behalf of the state. And I have a whole lot of additional information about the case itself, including many affidavits and filings. So that's the basis of my comments. I must start by saying that this is a golden day in the history of India, in the progress of democracy, and in the safeguarding of our Constitution. It marks a landmark judgment in the strengthening of federalism as the basis for the Indian Constitution, the Union of States concept in the preamble, and it finally draws a line on the extent of what I would consider unconstitutional and illegitimate centralization by this authoritarian government. All these results are due to the wisdom and courage of our Chief Minister and the dedicated efforts of our legal team. I will explain why I say that in a minute. This court has extended the judgment it delivered in the case of the state of Punjab versus the government of India in December of last year, and it has in fact now strengthened it by putting time frames for the governor to act. In that sense, because of the notion of a time frame for the first time since the Constitution was adopted in 1950, I see it as an even more landmark and important judgment than the Kesavananda Bharati case of December 2023, which affirmed the basic structure of the Constitution, and even more than the electoral bonds case, which, though it declared the bonds illegal, neither cured the negative consequences of all the things that had happened, nor forced any penalties on anybody. This is a much better and much more landmark judgment because it puts time frames, it extends the judgment of Punjab, and it is in the times that we are now in where we see extraordinarily centralizing of power by the union government and interference in the functioning of democratically elected state governments. I consider it number one judgment since the Constitution was adopted. I want to point out three very important aspects here that may not have been highlighted by others. Some of these bills, the 10 bills, as you know, some of these bills date back to 2020. That is now 5 years, and they were not passed by our government. When we were in opposition, they were passed by the ADMK government. Second, I want to point out that at every step of the way, at every step of this court proceeding, the actions of the governor's office were, I'm trying to find the right word without diminishing the dignity of the office, I will say unseemly, not fitting for the office of the governor. What do I mean? The first time we had the case come up for hearing, bills that had been sitting with the governor for 2-3 years, just ahead of the hearing, get sent back with a note saying, I have withheld consent, in an attempt to make the hearing infructuous. Right? We get the bills back, we pass them. Then the next hearing comes. In the next hearing, the governor's case, the side argues that because the original bill was kept back with the governor, but a message saying I have withheld the bill and a photocopy of the bill was sent back to us, we don't have the right to repass the bill. I mean, can you think of anything more childish than this? Is this like some family property dispute where you say, where is the original document? It is a government elected by crores of people, tens of crores of people. Certainly, the question of whether the bill is original or not doesn't arise. Just because my printout to you is held with you doesn't mean that you saying no to me and sending me a copy is not the effect of returning the bill. It's such a childish argument. I mean, unseemly may be not adequate a word. Then the next hearing, when the judgment of Punjab is clear that there is not infinite power to reject such bills, then the repassed bills all of a sudden get sent to the president. So here are the many ways that the office of the governor has tried to subvert the functioning of the Supreme Court of India and the judicial process in childish, unseemly ways. This must be noted. The third point I want to make, which I said earlier, it is the wisdom and sagacity of our Chief Minister that got us this verdict. For example, of the bills that had been passed in 2020, the first one that was withheld was a bill that renamed the Fisheries University in the name of the former Chief Minister, Selvi J. Jayalalitha. And it did other things like changing the Chancellor and so forth. Had there been a partisan bent, had there been an intent to somehow do politics with this, had we amended the bill, it would not be the same as resubmitting the bill, because the Supreme Court judgment is very clear. If the same bill is passed and brought, then you don't have the right. But if you bring an amended bill, he has the right to reject it again. So it is the wisdom, the magnanimity, the sagacity of the Chief Minister that says we are above politics. This is about states' rights, about federalism. If you want to name the university, go ahead, we support you. We passed the bill again and sent it. Even if we had withheld 2 or 3 of these bills from repassing, it would have weakened our case. It is only because all 10 bills were repassed and sent that our case was so good. I hope, therefore, that this marks a turning point in the way that the federal structure of our country is taken forward. You may all remember that the Honorable Prime Minister was the greatest champion of states' rights, the greatest votary for the notion of federal decision-making and support systems when he was the Honorable Chief Minister of the state of Gujarat. I hope that this inflection point is where we all start to work together again. And I want you to think about this in the context of what is happening in the world right now. We are seeing markets melt down. We are seeing a return to parochial interests and the breaking of global trade kind of patterns, which has not happened in 100 years. This is a chance for India to shine. For India to shine, we need the states and the union to work together and not to have the union start putting barriers in the functioning of the state government, where bills that are passed by the elected government of the will of the people, whether that's a ADMK government or a DMK government, is immaterial, or any state. As Chief Minister has pointed out today, this is not a victory for the DMK, it is not a victory for Tamil Nadu, it is a victory for all states. It is a victory for the notion of federalism, and in that sense it is a victory for India, because it hopefully puts us on a path that is different than the path we have been, which has been a fractious kind of confrontational path, and more towards a united progress path for the state and for the future of our country. Okay, those are my comments. If you have any questions, I'll take them now.
Sir, how does the Supreme Court ruling impact the constitutional powers of state governors concerning the approval or reservation of bills for presidential consideration?
I think it provides tremendous clarity to Article 200, though it's only about 10 lines of text. It has been, in its interpretation, widely varying over the last 75 plus years. And it has been used and abused by a lot of people in a lot of ways. So I think this precise clarification with timelines, what is possible, within what time, what about the second time around, I think is an enormous, enormous improvement. It has not profoundly changed anything about the intent of Article 200. It is exactly the same reading of Article 200, but with a timeline. That makes the world of difference.
You also spoke about the timeline, sir, and the Supreme Court today also mentioned about it. What are the consequences of not adhering to it, sir, going forward?
I assume that, look, I don't want to speculate, I don't want to hypothesize. Every time somebody asks me this kind of question, I say, I assume that every citizen, irrespective of the role, whether they are a common citizen, in a corporate executive office, in public service, in governor, in president, wherever, I assume that every citizen has the natural intent to be a good citizen, to follow the rule of law, and to operate within the Constitution. So I must assume that once the Supreme Court has clarified and interpreted the nuances of the existing article in the Constitution, then all people will adhere to it. I don't want to speculate about what happens if they don't, because I assume nobody will willingly not adhere to it. Of course, you have seen, for what it's worth, that the Supreme Court still retains power under Article 142, which they have exercised, that says that instead of keeping on, sending it back and giving good advice, I consider it deemed passed, right? So there's always that option to the court.
So what precedent does the Supreme Court ruling provide going forward for the state governors and the relationship between the state governors and the state governors?
Look, sometimes you got to read the other words in the judgment more than just the operative outcome. And they say things like no governor has either an explicit veto or a pocket veto. Nobody should act as if they have greater kind of power than the will of the people of the elected government. So I think all these thoughtful people will read them the way they should be read. And I hope that they will be imbibed in the day-to-day functioning of all governors in all states.
Sir, one last question, sir. Even today in the Assembly, there have been some of the demands saying that the governor should resign. And do you want to comment on it, sir?
Not my job, not my pay grade. I'm just interpreting and commenting about additional aspects that other people may not have done. Whatever my chief minister decides, as a good party man, I follow his line.